In our culture, everything is based on success. But what is success? Who defined it? Who decided that success was the goal instead of fulfillment? What happens if we shake up that definition? What if we make our own definition of success? My name is Tony Grebmeyer, and on this podcast, I'm going to dig deep into the real stories behind success. Join me as I interview other entrepreneurs who've climbed up Success Mountain and have come back down to share their stories so you can succeed. If you're ready to join a community of other entrepreneurs redefining success and finding fulfillment, go to BeFulfilledLife.com and join the community. Now, let's dive into today's show. Welcome to Be Fulfilled and Driven by Purpose. I'm your host today, Tony Grebmeyer, and our guest lives by the motto, be different, be creative, be a leader. He is an artist, a business owner, and an entrepreneur. He's also a good friend of mine. He first started his own design agency, then that agency is specializing in brand development, web software development, digital marketing, and more. And recently an incident management system for businesses, schools, and government entities. He's got a lot to share. He's got a big heart, got a love for Christ. My good friend, please welcome to the show, Brad Ball.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, first and foremost, how are you doing? Like, how are things? How's life?
I'm doing well. I can't complain. I mean, when everything kind of changed, it was interesting the first week, but then my perspective kind of shifted and was completely different.
Man, I got to tell you, that sounds very similar to the guests I've been interviewing, right?
Yeah.
That everything came at you like the wall was falling on top of you. And then after everything kind of fell to the ground, you could start picking up little pieces, right? Because you kind of go, okay, I'm here. Now what can I do about it, right? And I think it's the same kind of emotion everybody's been dealing with. It's like, all right, it hit us. Now what are we going to do about it?
Well, yeah, you kind of go through the worst case scenario, right? And try to anticipate what that looks like moving forward and what you need to do to ensure you retain as many people as possible. And that part's stressful because when your business is all about people and relationships, it made for a difficult time. But once we kind of got through that and established kind of the groundwork, we were off to the races.
No, I love that. I appreciate it. So, hey, Brad, what we're going to try to do is go around the racetrack of life for a little bit. I want to go fast because, I think a lot of times people can draw out their message. And I know your message is impactful. I've gotten a chance to watch you up front, attend like a men's retreat with you, chance to see you in your skill. I truly believe is your craft, which is being able to do speed painting. I'm sure there's a better term for it, but that's what I look at it like. And in 5 minutes, you can just do an amazing design. And you've had some incredible opportunities with that, speaker, and you got a lot of these things in the back of it, but you're a father, a husband, a business owner, a son. When you look back at your life, kind of where you're at now, but where you were, where did you really first kind of wake up to like, wow, man, I can do anything I want in my life?
That's a good question. I would say that was just a process overall. Yeah, I wouldn't have been in business if it wasn't for some of the circumstances that I went through. But I would say I really took a turn in terms of business mindset probably back in 2010-ish. And, in part, it was going through a difficult time within the business and really deciding to treat it as a business as opposed to just, hey, this is what I do. And, I've always had that service heart mentality, which, is a fine line between taking that and actually having a business. And so once I took that approach, the mindset changed and it really created a different outlook that, yeah, we can achieve these things. Because if you don't necessarily have any vision or goals, it's kind of hard to go anywhere. And I would say that was the turning point of actually, okay, we're going to do this thing and take off with it.
How would you describe when you hear somebody, mention like purpose? What does purpose mean to you?
Well, you hear that a lot, especially in the church realm. And I think people use that as maybe some inspiration, but I think for me personally, it's a lot about what does this day look like and what am I supposed to do today? And I think a lot of times we look in the future, I'm going to be, a famous singer or artist or business person, but that typically doesn't happen overnight. And so what are you supposed to do today, I think is the most important thing that you can really look at. And it just takes it a whole different approach when you look at it on a day-by-day basis. Now, overall, purpose, I think that's what drives you. That's what pushes you to do these great things and the vision behind that. And so for me, it was always a struggle to look 5 years out because I don't know what the next 5 years is going to bring. But back in 2010, that's where that all kind of changed, because you really need to have a strong outlook on the future. And so used to be my purpose, I thought I was going to be a pastor or whatnot, and that completely changed to where, I'm a business owner. But then when you look back throughout the history of, what's happened over the last 20 years, I'm still that same person. I'm basically pastoring, leading my employees. And I wouldn't have necessarily understood that 10 years ago.
It's just interesting to hear you kind of share, right? Like you were going down one path and then you had a shift, right? Or you can call it whatever you'd like. It's just something changed,
yeah.
Right? And I'd love to talk about what you do today and maybe some of the things that have shown up by just trying lots of different things along the way till you kind of find the thing that you're doing today.
So today it's very different. I'll just touch a little bit on the history. In 2000, I went out on my own. And in part, it wasn't that I was going to become a business owner. It was to take care of my mom. She had been diagnosed with a terminal disease that really was something out of her control and not necessarily natural. And basically, I took care of her for 2 years, and she passed away in 2003. And so essentially, I worked half the time and took care of her half the time, and that just was helping her out. And if it wasn't for that happening, I may have never gone on this entrepreneur path. And so as I look through the history of what's happened, it's evolved. So as an artist, a designer, I've done that for the past 20 years, but now that's evolved to more of the leadership role, more of the pastoral. I'm still doing art. I'm doing less design because I have a team of people that are doing it. And that's a different role. So there's times where I go, what did I need to do today? And so I have one-on-ones with certain key people. And what it's also allowed me to do is slow down a little bit and really try to think. And that's important as an entrepreneur and an artist, slowing down enough to really see what's next or what's to come. And it's been interesting. I'm not a writer, but I've had to write some emails, especially post-COVID, and really try to communicate a message to customers and even our employees about where we are and where we're going. And it's overall been received rather well. But if I was so busy like I'd been in the past, going from one thing to the next, designing one project to the next project, I wouldn't have had the bandwidth to really see and know how to communicate the message that needs to be communicated.
No, I like that, and so we got a chance to meet because we were a part of a same mastermind. We met just not too long ago. We got to meet in Puerto Vallarta for War Room.
Well, we met in Utah first back in November briefly because you gave me your book.
I did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sitting and really like connecting with you, I could really kind of see and feel your heart. I love the fact that you got a big heart for Jesus. And I love the fact that you're out helping to really kind of spread a positive impacted message. I mean, I hope that we'll love to get a link to some of your work, and we'll put it on the show notes so people can check out what you're doing. Because what you're doing is amazing. I mean, imagine watching Picasso paint today. That's what it's like for me watching Brad. Like he's just got this really cool style. He's working on doing speaking, gigs around sharing a message, painting, and really talking. So I love the fact that your painting and talks are going to be incredible. I really think that's going to be an impactful message for the world too, because, we're so talented and yet we're kind of not living up to our talents. We're kind of like hiding behind masks and facades when, deep down inside, there's this thing that is causing us to be courageous. And I love the fact that you're stepping out into some uncharted waters and you're taking risks, and the rewards are on the upside. I know right before the COVID and everything that was coming was an opportunity for you to paint Arnold Schwarzenegger at a really cool VIP event that Digital Marketer and TNC was putting on. And you and I kind of started talking a little bit more frequently because you're like, how do I do this? And I'm like, you paint daily, and you paint daily. And I think that's the whole thing that I've been listening to a lot of guests that I've been interviewing is talking about planting seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Planting seeds. What does planting seeds sound like when I mention that to you?
Well, it's, I just planted a whole bunch of grass at my house, so it brings on a whole different meaning. Now it was sod versus seed, so it's already grown. But, to plant seed, you have to water it if you want any growth. And it also has to be planted in good soil and needs to be nurtured. And, to be, upfront with the art that I haven't neglected it, but I haven't maybe spent as much time as I should have over the last 15 years, in part because the business always took a precedent over the art. And even though that the art is really what makes me unique and different than most people in the country or world for that matter, that I didn't dedicate the time that I could have. And so, like bringing up the Arnold Schwarzenegger painting, that's really outside of my typical comfort zone of what I like to do, but it challenged me. And the only way to grow as an artist, entrepreneur, is to work on your weaknesses. And I would say, quick faces live and how I paint is harder because of my style. But I got better. I painted I think I probably did at least 10 to 15 different versions of, what Arnold could look like in 5 minutes. And I got better. Now I still need to keep practicing. This event's been postponed to December, so I have some time, but I need to do more. And I was able to paint on a video podcast last week. We shared about creativity and business, and at the end, I did an impromptu 5-minute painting, and it went over really well. And so I was like, man, what else could I do that, especially during this time? And at the end of the day, it's just I need to dedicate the time to paint. And I think back when we were talking, you really kicked me in the butt and challenged me. And I was on a call with some people last week, and some friends out in New York. They hadn't seen what I've done, and they're like, dude, if you don't get this out there and start sharing this, you're being selfish. And so
I wouldn't use those words, but yeah, I agree with them.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I get it. I hear the message. And, Vinny's a good friend too. So he kicks me around all the time. So he was on that call too. So that's my challenge, is to really, at least weekly have something out there. And so I've already ordered a bunch of, stretcher bars and just materials, because, when everything happened, I didn't order any supplies, and it's getting kind of low, and a lot of them are delayed. So I'm going to get back on it, and I have some ideas to do some pretty cool stuff kind of in the garage during this time. So really stepping out as an artist and business owner, and sharing my experience, because there's, 20 years of this that I have a lot of different ideas and opinions, and, there's no reason for me not to share.
No, I agree. And you live by this motto, like be different, be creative, and be a leader. Where did that come from?
Well, I think a lot of times as people, we just kind of get stuck in a rut, and it's okay to be different. I mean, you see that in different cultures, especially in the young society. I've got kids that are 12 and twins that are 12 and an 8-year-old, and they're always wanting to do something different or stand out or be noticed. And I think that's a good thing. And being creative, I believe everybody is inherently creative, whether you're an artist or not. You think about people that, oh my gosh, they're creative. George W. Bush, what is he doing now? He actually is a painter. He's painting. And, oil man, president, and artist. It's crazy that sounds, but when you go back as a child and you think about what you did, and I'll ask you, Tony, this question. When you were driving in a car, because we didn't have the video game devices and phones that people have today, what did we do? Or what did you do in a car?
Wow. The only thing I did in a car growing up is the same thing I still like to do today. I'm like in observation mode. I love playing sign games, like when you play the ABCs, right? I love playing I Spy, spot stuff, and play the games with the kids in the back seat. I always listen to music. I roll down the windows. I sing. I bang on the steering column, and I think that the things that I do I'm still doing to this day. It was funny because you're like, we didn't have the video games. I'm like, man, I had an Atari. I don't know about you, but I had a Commodore 64 when I was a little bit older, and
I had them, but not in the car, right? And so I actually brought this up in my call last week, and I said, when I was a kid, I remember, and my kids will do it if you especially call it out, you look at the clouds and what do you see? And you start to think, oh, there's a horse or there's an alligator, and your imagination starts to run wild. And then, I was bringing this up, and it triggered a memory, and his name was Jason. And it took him down this whole path of remembering his childhood that he hadn't thought before, because it was like his grandfather and him that did certain things. But you're in a car and you're allowing your imagination, your creativity to go. And, I think most kids color, when they're younger. It's just something, you do inside the line, color inside the lines, outside the lines. I remember being very particular. I did not want any color to get outside the lines when I was 5 or 6 or whatever it was. And that was part of my artist journey, just even coloring at a young age. But then you start sitting in a chair in a classroom, hour after hour. And then you get into business and you're stuck in a cubicle all day. And quickly that creativity and that imagination starts to slow down, and you don't use it as much. And so my challenge in terms of being creative is to really tap into that again. And it's not necessarily hard. You just got to slow down and do it. Now, can I teach you to be an amazing artist? I think I can teach art. Now, creativity, imagination is hard. That's really you letting your brain go. But art can be trained and learned. And so, but as business owners and entrepreneurs, I think we're all inherently creative, and you just need to slow down and tap into it. So that's really where the be creative comes from. And there's many different areas of what creative looks like. And that's up for, interpretation.
How often when you step in front of a blank canvas, do you just create without having something like in your mind that you want to do? Like, how often do you just stare at that blank canvas and let it just come to you?
Well, when I first started doing I call it live painting or speed painting, back in 97, 98. So really there wasn't anybody that was doing it at the time. And my youth worship pastor at the time, who lives in Colorado Springs, not far from you, they were doing a new album, and his focus was to bring art and dance back into the church, because you really didn't have the artistic world other than music in the church world. And so his whole thing, it was an hour and a half set. I think it was about an hour. And he said, do not come up with any preconceived ideas. Just do whatever is led in the moment. And same thing was said with the dancer. And he's like, do not have any ideas. If you have any, get them out of your head. And it was really improvisational, spirit-led, if you want to call it that as well. And that's how I started. The first, most of the ones that I did originally were that way. Now, as it's evolved to where there's 5 minutes, I have to have some type of, generally speaking, of what I'm going to start with, just because of the time frame. If it's an hour, more often than not, I'll start with something and it evolves into something else. And so it's really bound by the time frame. And so, but yeah, I've been testing things, and there was a painting down in Mexico that we saw that was a skull, kind of a Mexican styled skull. I was like, that would make a really good painting, especially live. I could do it really fast. And so I brought it back and tested it, and it turned out really cool. And so that was, preconceived idea, but the style behind it and the way it evolves is very unique and random. And so even if there is an idea, especially in a live setting, it generally takes on different meaning as it goes, in part because I put paint on directly on a canvas. There's nothing typically drawn on before, and it's hard to really mimic or duplicate paintings over and over because it's so random. Does that make sense?
100%. And then a shift really quick, because I want to get into some stuff about business, and then I talked to you pretty much right when everybody went into kind of like the safe stay at home mindset, right?
Yeah.
And what was your initial kind of like thought when that wall hit and you're like, oh my gosh, like what was your initial thought? Because I don't want to quickly jump to where you're at today and what things have come from that opportunity to be, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an artist, I'm a leader. I can remind myself of the skills that I've been given and I've earned, that I can go and help pivot and make an adjustment in my business.
Well, overall, I thought it was crazy. I mean, I was on a boat when right before everything hit the fan. I was on the last not Norwegian, what was it on? it doesn't matter. I was on the last cruise ships that went out and came back. And so, it's like, what are the odds of, with that many people on a boat from all over the country of, getting, this illness and, seeing more data based on that. But in terms of, we were freaked out in part of just not knowing what was going to happen in terms of the marketing sides of things. And will people scale back their budgets? And that's how we had to look at it in terms of getting to kind of our base of what we know we can handle and that we have coming in. And so once we went through that exercise, it was extremely hard week to really dig through that, because we were probably overstaffed because we've been launching a new company and there's some other things we're trying to do. And so if everything's going to go away, how long can we handle that? And so that was the real wake up call. But in terms of going remote, we had already not prepared for this, but over the holidays, we let all our employees work from home instead of coming into the office. Gives them more time. They just had to bill, or they had to do X amount of hours of billable work during that time frame. And so all their computers were set up and ready to go. So I'm on a boat and my business partner says, hey, we're going to do remote work for 2 weeks because this is all kind of blowing up. And I said, okay, that's fine. And so everybody's already ready to go and nothing's changed. And that's kind of how we approached it. But yeah, I thought it was overall, kind of crazy. I'm conservative, but I was the first to quarantine because being on a boat for a week and getting back, I'd already been, challenged by one of my employees, said, don't come in the office for, a week or two after you get back. And so I'd self-quarantine for the 14 days. And anyway, even though this kept going and going. And so that was kind of my first approach. But overall, we haven't slowed down since then.
In business, tell me what has been created out of kind of like maybe this new lens that you're looking through.
So, the big thing, we have our agency and we're, adding some new things there. And I think you'll see that across a lot of digital agencies. And our web development and software application development they just keep growing. I mean, there's more and more stuff to do. Designs kind of ebb and flow, but it's allowed us to create, branding packages that start low tier all the way to high tier, so we can capture more of the customers that come in. And I've already sent, I think, 4 of our branding packages in the last week and a half since this has all happened. And so that's good. You think, oh, this is all going to die. And then some of it's people wanting new logos for new businesses they're starting. And in times like this, that's what you see, where innovation and new things start to happen. And so for us, launching a new company, really it started at the end of 2018. And we built what we call an incident management software for an oil and gas company. And obviously oil and gas has been hit pretty hard the last couple of years. And what they wanted to do is track anything that happens on a well site. But what it also does, it allows you different incidents to be related. So if there was an issue on another well site, you could relate those 2 incidents, invite authorities. And it's just this big database of information, and cost analysis and all that. Well, we started pivoting it for schools last year because in Texas, there's Senate Bill 11 that required all schools to threat assess and track students. And in January, February, March, we really started to push as schools started doing their budgets to get this into schools, because there's no way for them to really do that at the moment. And we had already basically gotten the software ready for that. Well, then schools get shut down because of COVID. So what do? Basically put a pause. But what's interesting is we've been talking with this large company, 100 million plus company, about kind of creating an alliance or a partnership with them, because they're in kind of the government world. And when all the COVID stuff hit, they pitched it to a government or a municipality to be able to track the financial impact of COVID in their community. And so for the last month, we've basically rebuilt the software completely to track that within the local communities. And so the potential of this other company is huge. And so I think we're on the implementation stage. They're just working through on how the funding's going to come. But that's a huge opportunity for us, and something we would have never really thought about without going through this COVID scenario.
Yeah, when listening to what you kind of like, the opportunities come when you're working, right? You're not like putting your feet up going, wonder what's going to happen today. It's like you were doing what you're doing, and then an opportunity striked, and then you were able to kind of do what you love. And that's, one of the things that I want anybody listening today, the skills that, Brad's talking about, right? Like I love the motto. I think that's so great. And I'm going to add one at the end, right? So be different, be creative, be a leader, and be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Like those are the things that just make you kind of go, hey, you know what? The opportunity. How has leading your family been for you with going through all this? Because I know that, I've heard on other shows, today I'm a leader, I'm always a leader. But how's it been for you at home?
I think overall it's been good. I think my wife's probably had the hardest time. I mean, we had homeschooled for the last couple of years with our twins, but we had decided to put them in public in January, in part because they're social kids. They wanted to be around other kids, and I think they were pushing my wife's limits. And so to go 3 months, go on spring break, and then come back, and it's back to homeschool, I think has been a little frustrating, and so that's probably been the hardest thing. I think in terms of leading the family, church is obviously different. So that's been a change. But, I've been challenging my wife to get out there and put some music, because she's a worship leader and she's written tons of songs, and she's always put that on the back burner. And so me being challenged about getting my art, I spun that on her as well. As like, hey, you got to get this out there. You're being selfish if you don't. And so I try to do that, but sometimes as a husband, a lot of times your wives, if somebody else tells your wife something, they'll do it. But if you tell them, it's like, why are you telling me this? And so it's just weighing that day to day. You're around each other almost 24. You're around each other 24/7 right now, and we do different projects around the house, and we're going to have a game night tonight, I think. So yeah, it's a work in progress would be the best way to define that. I mean, everybody is great. I think the kids can push their limits a little bit. Let's just say that.
Man, you're very popular today.
Well, I turned off my text messages on my computer, and now they're just dinging anyway. So
I know technology amazes me at the same time. I'm like, man, I thought I got this thing all figured out, but no. Hey, so a couple more questions, and then we're going to wrap up today's show. Like, where's the best place for people to connect with you? Like, are you a social media kind of person? Do you just like interact in email, text? Like, tell me, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
I'm on pretty much every social. My handle typically is I am Brad Ball. It used to be Brad Ball Art, but then people thought Brad Ballert, which doesn't make sense.
You are a baller. I played basketball with you.
So I am Brad Ball is all my handles. So Facebook, Instagram, I'm actually on TikTok as well, and only posted a few things, but that's kind of one of the things I need to do moving forward. Website, I do have bradballart.com. It's kind of out of date. I'm in the process of building bradball.com now, which is kind of an entrepreneurial and art website, kind of an all-in-one. And so that's in the works, but there's art there, and those are the best places to see and what I do. And email, I have a couple different ones, but my company is Ardent Creative, and so email is brad@ardentcreative.com. That's the one I get the most, but I have one at me@bradball.com as well.
Let's talk about the importance of mentorship and being surrounded by people who share similar values to you, and how does that play into living a driven with purpose life?
Oh, I think it's huge. Accountability, especially. And so, being on Wild at Heart with the group of guys that, I got to know and become a part of was just really life altering. And so when it comes to business, we're in a mastermind together. I think hearing the stories in that and building accountability and relationships has probably been the biggest thing in the last 3 years that we have done. And being able to do the things that we have, but also even starting this new company and being challenged in that to grow something bigger than ourselves is huge. And somebody that is, if you have a mentor or need a mentor, but finding somebody that can get a slightly different perspective than you because a lot of times as people, business owners, we're so stuck in what we see that's right in front of us, and can't see the forest past the trees. What are you missing? And getting somebody that's kind of on the outside looking in, that can get that 10,000 foot view and see the loopholes or the areas that could be problematic, I think are extremely important for everybody. And I find that the most valuable thing in mentorship is trusting somebody to be candid and honest about what's real. And giving people that ability to do it is probably the hardest thing, though, and the trust factor of that.
Wow. That is it's a good way of kind of looking at it too, right? Like giving somebody, or at least creating space where you can be vulnerable, but not judged.
Yeah.
Where that someone's like seeing you for who you are and understanding that you're a human and you want to do the best you possibly can. There's things that others can see in us that we can't see in ourselves. And then there's the acceptance of the things that people say, which has also been very difficult. And through good coaching, good mentors, and good friends like yourself, you're able to see things that, where your wounds, your hurts, and your pains, and then love, like when people come in with a different perspective and an angle to kind of help you to see something completely different. And you're like, oh, so that's what you were talking about when you asked me to shift. Just not change, just shift. Just look at it from a different perspective. So,
and you said something about judge that triggered something in my mindset. And a lot of times that's used as a negative. And again, it's a perspective that, if somebody's in your life, you're asking them to judge you and call you out when you're out of line or when you need that nudge. And I think that's a good thing, to have somebody that's really keeping you accountable and judging what you do. And you do it in sports all the time. If you didn't have a judge or a timer or whatever it is, would it mean the same? And I think the same thing applies in life and in business. We need that accountability to challenge us to do great things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I just want to say thank you very much for coming on board today and sharing your purpose and what you do and why you do it. And I just appreciate you, man. I think it's awesome to see the growth in a short period of time, just of spending time with you and just seeing the things that you're facing, which is just like what we're all facing, right? We live each day to the fullest and hope we get the chance to live tomorrow and do everything we possibly can today to be of service to others. So I think you're a living example of that. So I just want to say thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure. Anytime, man.
All right. So all of his notifications and then some. His name is Brad Ball and my name is Tony Grebmeyer. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, choose to make today the absolute best day of your life.
Thanks for listening to today's show. But before you go, let me ask you a question. How would you like to be the architect of your journey in this game we call life? Take the next step now at www.tonygrebmeyer.com. Enter your details to get the first week of the Be Fulfilled Journal for free. It includes access to our private community of thousands of other entrepreneurs. It'll give you more clarity and freedom in your day, and it might just change your life forever.